Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is July 1st, and my voice dries out. And this is another of our bi-weekly SIG CLI meeting. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. Our agenda is packed with topics, and I see there are more coming over and over again. So I do hope we will be able to finish it by the end of the hour. There are two announcements. One, I haven't put it there. There's a code freeze next Thursday, if I remember correctly, July 9th. So if you are in need for a review, approval, or anything like that, reach out on Slack. If you need me, ping me several times until you get your stuff approved or reviewed, and then hopefully it will land for 119. And the other one, I'm not sure who put it over here. It can be either, I'm guessing Phil or Sean might have put it over here. The KubeCon North America CFP was pushed to July 12th, or maybe Eddie added that one. Anyhow, yeah, that's definitely something worthy of noting out. Not sure what will be the format of KubeCon North America. I think we will figure it out soon. Yeah, quote, North America, quote, exactly. But I remember that the European version of the KubeCon will be happening mid-August. We have one session planned there, so-called SIG CLI open doors. I'll definitely link this CAD link to the. I'll add this CAD link to the agenda, to the announcements. Okay, let's. Enough of me talking. Let's move on to the main topics. Sean, are you on the call? I haven't seen your name in the participants, so I'm not sure if you're here already.
So I can speak for this one. This came up during the bug scrub. We didn't know, Sean kind of had an opinion about it, about not allowing this option. But I wish he was here so he could speak on it. So maybe we can punt to next week.
Yeah, definitely I would like to hear from Sean, because if he had an opinion and I'm not seeing that opinion being expressed in the issue, that can definitely wait. Or maybe if Sean shows up later on, we can return to the topic. So the next topic is from Vinay. I do hope that's your proper name.
Hi, yeah, that's correct.
Go ahead.
So a quick intro. I'm Vinay. I work with FutureWay out of Seattle, and I've been working on this KEP and feature for resizing your pods without restarting them, which is the in-place vertical scaling. And the feature is now code complete, and we're trying to target it for 119. That's by July 9th. And I was hoping there are a couple of files that need to be reviewed by SIG. The robot said that gave the SIG CLI as one of the approvers required for the PR to be approved. And this is a change to the describe function for pod and nodes. And this comes from, with this feature, the design of this new feature, what it does is in the pod spec, you have containers, and the containers have resources fields for limits and requests CPU memory and storage, ephemeral storage. We made this feature makes those fields mutable after the pod's been created, and to track what the actual resources are allocated. So when you make it mutable, it means that the user can express their desired resources. Let's say they asked for 1 CPU and they want 2, or VPA in this case, the automation detects that the CPU usage is near 1. The pod could use more and decides that it needs 2, so it could change it. And when that happens, we still want to track what the current allocations are, and that's part of the design. And a new pod spec field was introduced in the container spec called resources allocated. And to report the actual resources that have been given to the container, there's this field in the status called resources. The change to describe now shows the resources allocated field, and that's what I wanted to go over, or mainly identify if there's a person who can review this code over the next week or so. I can quickly pull it up on the screen here if you'd like, but I don't want to waste everyone's time on this if it can be done offline.
Yeah, I can definitely have a look at it. A week is definitely a reasonable time frame for me to have a look at it. I quickly skimmed through the changes.
I was hoping so.
The majority of the changes seem pretty straightforward from SIG CLI point of view.
Okay.
Since you're adding the changes, at least for that part of view. What will be the easiest way to verify this thing? I mean, I wonder if you could, if there is a chance you could split, because I've noticed that this PR is pretty big.
Yes, the PR is big. I think the link that I sent out, there are two files in kubectl. I can redo it to split it so that the kubectl changes go into a single change list. I can do that. I think there are about 10 commits right now. I was looking to see if I can compress them to smaller as the reviews went by. Let me see if I can do that. But it's just, give me 1 second.
I mean, generally from any kind of PR,
yeah,
it will be easier for you to gather people to review smaller changes than one big change. Because
that's true.
If I will have comments with regards to kubectl changes, for example, I might be unnecessarily blocking if the rest of the PR could land easily. So personally,
Okay.
and I've been giving the same advice to several people already, and I know that other maintainers are also similar, that it is so much easier to get smaller bits in rather than big ones, because if you have a big one, it's harder to review. Like I mentioned, some interchanges between one and the other might be blocking other pieces. So if you could split this thing into several smaller PRs and then target specific people from specific groups, specific SIGs that are responsible just for that area, then trust me, it'll be much smoother. Can you quickly tell me if the API is already merged, or API is also part of this PR?
API is part of this PR. I think I was trying to figure out how this can be done into separate PRs with because API needs to be in before this PR can be even created. So the way I was looking at it was there are separate commits in the PR, 10 different commits. And in this case, I had one commit for the kubectl changes, but then I realized after the tests ran that I'm not able to use the feature-gate flag in kubectl. So that was one of the questions I had for here as well. So is there a way to disable, like this feature is going to be alpha in 119 if it makes it. Is there a way to disable these changes in kubectl for alpha, and then when the feature-gate flag is switched in beta, then it turns on? The code changes are there for anyone who wants to see it or try it out. Is there a way for us to do that with kubectl? Because the bot, one of the tests failed, saying the import of feature-gate is not allowed in kubectl, invalid import or something like that.
Right, because we don't have the knowledge. The feature gates are set on the server, and the kubectl is orthogonal to the server. So The
So
option
how
that
do
we
you
have
enable or
is either
disable?
we are changing the functionality, we are verifying whether the functionality exists on the server or not. And honestly, for kubectl describe, I prefer to have only the bits that are GA, because within kubectl there is a get option, and you can always get the row JSON or YAM description of an object, and that
Yeah,
it will give you the full information about the resource. If this is something and the API is not in, I might be cautious about whether uh, we will be able to expose that in kubectl. But I would definitely start with getting the API, because the API review needs to go through, the API changes need to go through API review committee. And only if when you get that bit in, you'll be able to land in, the rest of the bits. So
yeah,
I would
that is,
start with splitting this PR into several smallers. I can definitely have a look at it. But without API, it might be problematic to land this for 119.
yeah, it's already been reviewed. Tim Hawkin had looked at my changes in the API and given some comments, and they've been addressed. Right now, it's mainly that's the first commit in the PR, the API changes, and now it's waiting for either Tim Hawkin or Jordan Leggett to look at it and say, yeah, it's good, or no, it's not. And once it goes in, my concern is even after it goes in. Let's say we have the kubectl changes the way they are right now. The fields are going to be there in the API, but they're not going to be enabled. So when you do describe, it's going to show zeros, and which is fine because that's what it is when the feature is disabled. Ideally, I'd like to not show those fields at all, since they're zeros. Feature is not enabled, uh, but I couldn't figure out a way to do that. So
maybe
I
I
think
think there. Let me just chime in here for a minute.
sure.
Considering the UX and the CLI experience probably deserves its own discussion independent of the API. There's things to consider like client server version skew, right? So even if the feature is enabled, like is it like it may be enabled on the server, it may not be enabled on the server, it may be the client may know nothing about it. Like so you could merge this, have it available on the server, have it enabled, and have a
Yeah.
kube control version that does not have this code in it. You could have it not merged in the server, not available as a resource at all, and a kube control that does have this, right? So there's, and then it's additionally many of the kube control commands already like support generic sort of resources like apply. You don't need to do anything for. Describe should just work for CRDs. So I think there's definitely a discussion here of like why do we need to make changes to kube control, because we wouldn't be able to do this for a CRD like when we're introducing a new API. And so like is it something that's necessary or not? So all that is to say this probably is worth having its own discussion, and it's not a discussion you're going to want to have on this PR where
Yeah.
you're also trying to get the API reviewed. So I just get the API approved, fully merged, available in a Kubernetes build.
Yeah.
And then start thinking of like, then we should have like a proposal of like, what is the desired UX and why are we even changing kube control? Why isn't it okay the way it is?
Okay, yeah, I can do that. This is not critical to the feature itself. It's nice to have the describe show the allocations, but if it's not there, you can still get it by doing the OYAML. It's not blocking you, as you said.
And describe works for CRDs too, right? So you don't even have to do get YAML. You should be able to do just describe on the resource, and it will print
Describe
out.
is actually the one that is not working for CRDs. The problem is that
I thought it spit out all the YAML. It used to.
I can't remember what we currently do with the CRDs, and I do remember that I was talking with Clayton so that he does a brain dump, because some time ago he mentioned that he has an idea in his head. So I asked him about the brain dump for server-side describe.
I thought describe did heuristics, like to essentially dump out the best it could based on what it saw looking at the API. And so it's entirely possible that like what is dumped by describe is sufficient, or at least like not terrible. And it's might be actually the one thing I would suggest doing before you get the API merged is run just kubectl describe without the changes and see what it spits out. And that'll give you kind of a gut check for like, does this API look clean? I guess from a like readability perspective.
By without the changes, by that you mean having the feature gate disabled? I did that. Do we run this kube control against an older version like 1.18? Is that one of the cases that I need to check for?
What happens if you just run like you take the last version of kubectl that was cut, like 1.17?
Right.
Right, and then you run that kubectl, do kubectl describe on a cluster that has your feature enabled.
It works. So that was one of the checks I did. This is critical. I think Jordan Leggett mentioned this. The down level version of the API needs to be able to, for the get, it's not so much of a problem because it's a field that's there which it doesn't know about, it's going to drop it. When you write back, when you do an update or a patch and you don't know about the field, then we need to be able to handle that case. And that was one of the issues that we discovered during the first round of API reviews, and then I fixed that. So what I did is I took the master branch, the current head master branch, built the kubectl, and used that to run against my feature for get and set. And it works. It doesn't have any issues. So when you write back, the fields that are being dropped are automatically added from the old description of the object, from the old pod spec. So that is handled. We took care of that.
Okay, I guess I was more curious about the not the mutations. So, but
The describe.
But yeah, just the describe. But yeah, the mutations are worth talking about as well.
Yeah, behind the mutations, I can try the describe. I didn't try describe in particular, but I tried get in my. I did it through an API. I wrote a little Go code. Pretty much uses the same APIs that the kubectl uses, but I believe I'll try this out just to complete the loop and make sure that they're square. It's fully squared away. However, I get the feeling that this feature, this change to kubectl is better. It's better to bring it in once we have this feature in beta where it's enabled and people can really use it instead of just seeing zeros. Does that sound good? Sound right?
Yeah, I mean, we should probably follow up on. I don't quite understand why the just zeros are there. I guess it's because it's serializing to a ghost struct, which is initializing those fields with empty values or something like that.
Correct. Yes. So when the feature is disabled, there is nothing there. It's the resources field is null, and the allocated describe will look at it and give zeros right now. And that's fine because it is not lying. It's telling that, okay, there's nothing there. It's showing zeros. But if it's just zeros, there's nothing to see. So that way I look at it as, okay, if there's nothing to see, then it shouldn't even be there, rather than the feature is disabled. So why do you see that? I think I get the feeling this is.
I think my advice would be get the API merged.
Yeah.
Knowing that at a minimum, like you're not blocked on kubectl, like you should be able to be successful whether you make the kubectl updates.
Okay.
Assume that it probably makes sense to do the kubectl updates when you're thinking about going to beta.
Yeah.
However, that's not necessarily set in stone because of the version skew semantics that are supported. Like you could be running a version of kubectl that doesn't. Like you could be running an older version of kubectl against a newer version of the API server. So in theory, you could have like the API fully enabled and available.
Yeah.
But running a kubectl that it wasn't at that version. So
That works.
There could be an argument made for put it in before it's to beta, but I don't think it's like super critical one way or the other.
Okay. Yeah, please take a look at the code anyways if you have the time. But I think my plan is to back out these changes for now and bring it in around beta time. Hopefully I wouldn't need a kep for this, would I? It's just a small 2-file change.
Probably not a cap, but at least explain like
Yeah,
why.
sure.
Like, because like assume we're going under the assumption that no changes are necessary for new
Right.
types because
Right.
we're trying to support CRDs,
Mhm.
and therefore like this would be an exception to that sort of philosophy, and so it'd be good at a minimum to know like why we're making that exception, because it's a change to an existing type or one thing or another, right? Like it'd just be good to
Right.
capture that.
Yeah, the for argument, I think the main point is, okay, as people are trying it out for debuggability, it's better, easier if they could see using just one quick kubectl command.
Sounds
But
good.
it's not a blocker. You can do OYAML and get the information that's in the pod spec. So I'll minimize the risk for now. Please do take a look at it if you get the chance. And it's the second link that pulls up the files, identify a reviewer for this feature, kubectl changes. There are 2 files. It pulls that up in the change list. Eventually I'll take it out, not today, but hopefully end of this week I'll do that. I'll make the change so that it's ready for review for the rest of the people. All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, the next topic is a shared library for Kubernetes. So it came out last week around or so. There was PR put together for basically shared library. The requirements because this is coming from the SIG scheduling, they are working on shortly exposing the parts of the scheduler API for allowing other people to build plugins for scheduler through something similar to what we did with building kubectl plugins. And as one of the requirements was having some kind of a shared library where core functionality from Kubernetes API can be shared. And it turns out that we can also use that library Go. I'm not sure if that will be the final name. There are discussions about the naming strategy. But basically, what's important for us is that the functionality that we share with the API server for RBAC, which is behind the auth reconcile command, can be placed in that shared library. Obviously, it won't happen overnight. So with slightly over a week before the code freeze, we won't be able to move everything and move kubectl outside of the main Kubernetes repo. But there's a light in the tunnel that if everything goes well within 120, we will be able to extract the shared libraries between API server and kubectl that are needed for kubectl auth reconcile command. And that is the last piece for us to be able to move kubectl to its own repo. So fingers crossed, with lots of good luck, I'm hoping that 120 will be the release when we will have kubectl in its own repository. If you want to have a look at the PR, I linked it in the agenda. If you have any suggestions, or if you know that other SIGs, because currently the motivation is our SIG CLI RBAC requirements, SIG scheduling helpers requirement. But if you're part of other SIG that might benefit from this shared library project, definitely comment on that one. We will be also reaching out to other SIGs, probably through Kate's dev mailing list, asking for their feedback. What else can potentially be part of that shared library? So I do hope that we will be able to finally close the kubectl move to its separate repo. Slowly, but there's a super bright light in the tunnel. Does anyone have any questions for this one? Okay, cool.
That's really awesome. Congrats.
Thanks.
All involved.
The next topic is Eddie. I'm guessing Eddie want to show off the awesome triage party tool that he's been using last time during bug scrub, which unfortunately I did miss.
Yeah, you can just click that link for me there.
Sure.
I don't have to drive very much. I also don't want to spend too much time on this. So Thomas Stromberg built an awesome tool called Triage Party. I think I mentioned it last time. It's basically a YAML filter list against GitHub API calls. And so it's a nice dashboard that you can write all these custom rules to show you different issues from different repos. I deployed a quick version of it here, pulling in the kube control repo. I'm working on getting the Kubernetes issues that are tagged pulled in here as well. It's a little more complicated when you're doing cross repo filters. But the idea is that hopefully so when we started doing bug scrubs, we had, I think it was close to like 400 open issues, and now we're down to like 40 or 50, right? So we've done a lot of work and definitely want to like keep up that good momentum. So the idea behind this is we can separate out all these sections. Again, they're just YAML filters. And if you go all the way back to the top, Maciej.
Yep.
This is like the main one here. There's also tabs at the top. I think it's probably collapsed because your browser's smaller. But there's different sections for different types of triage. So there's like daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, all this stuff. And so you can filter on all that. But basically, these are unprioritized issues older than 7 days, right? So just a very simple, straightforward YAML filter that'll pull all these in. And I guess the idea behind this is that as long as we keep addressing these issues and keep getting that queue down, and hopefully we can spend less time bug triaging and can branch out to like customize and some other cool bug triage stuff. So we're almost there with kube control. So if everyone just takes a look at this, we can move this to a different domain at some point. I just threw it up on a vanity domain I have. And then what I really wanted to discuss was, so for labels. So we realized that we use P0123 labels inside the kube control repo. I don't think any of the other SIGs or repos use those labels. They use the word ones like backlog, to be done soon or something. And so I wanted to propose or get thoughts on people's, so let me step back. So Sean said that he just reached for those because they were there, and his default for a issue was like a P2, but there's really no like description of what the different priority levels mean. What's nice is if you look at the label list inside GitHub issues, all the worded ones have like a clear description of what it is. So it's like, this issue should be done, this should be prioritized in someone's main task that they're working on, right? So it's very clear descriptions. So I want to get thoughts or basically propose switching using the P1s to the P worded ones to be a little more clear.
Yeah, definitely. No objection on that one. I'll probably second what you mentioned, Sean said, that P1 and P3 were there since beginning. I'm guessing that it was changed some time ago. I just didn't notice that change and got used to P1, P2, etc. And I just continued using those. So I personally don't have any objections. We could probably try to automate and translate the old ones, or eventually we will Yeah, probably we will have to figure out what we want to do with the old ones. But do we want to translate them, or we will leave the old as is, and we'll continue only using the new ones? And if we stumble upon the odd ones, we will be just adding them next to the numbered ones. I personally don't have any opinions on that one.
Yeah, there's only like 50 or 40 issues, so I think we'll just come across them eventually. Cool. Okay, so that's awesome. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was a run book for this. And so Minikube and some of the other projects that use this they basically have someone on triage duty, and it sounds like a good way to get like new people involved and contributing early. And so someone can come in here and go through like the daily queue and like read the issue, see if it needs to be triaged or prioritized or anything. So anyone have thoughts on getting that together? I figure we just like copy the Minikube one and make tweaks to what we want.
I remember that in the past we used to do something like that, but it just over time it slowly vanished. But I'm definitely open to give it another try. So yeah, definitely, it's worth a shot.
Cool. Okay, I'll copy Minikubes and get something together for us real quick. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you tell me if this only goes through issues, or this covers both issues and PRs as well?
This should cover PRs as well.
Okay.
So there should be a section below this somewhere for PRs. And I bring up this stat a lot, but if we respond, I know this is hard for us to do, but if we respond to issues or pull requests in 48 hours, people are 90% likely to contribute again, 90% more likely to contribute again. So that's just like a GitHub stat overall. So if we set like an SLA or an SLO to keep issues engaged, we can definitely grow contributions and hopefully get some new community members.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all on board on that one.
Cool.
Is that, and just to clarify, like that's for issues relating to contributions, or is that for does someone filing a bug on kube control, does that mean like they're 90% more likely to file another bug or like contribute in the same capacity? Or do you have any more insight into what that means?
I don't have the granulars there, but we don't necessarily have to like fix or do anything. It's just like an act, like, hey, we saw this PR, it's labeled as prioritized. Like it's someone, basically makes someone feel seen and heard pretty quickly for contributing. So it just increases the likelihood that they'll contribute again. So take that for what it is.
Engagement.
Yeah. So that's all I had for this.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Eddie about the triage party tool?
It's really cool. Looking forward to seeing it in action.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Eddie, you're again next on the agenda.
So I don't want to spend too long on this one either, but I was discussing with Brian yesterday, the PR that I have open around adding kube control commands and kind of standardizing on what a kube control command could look like or should look like. We kind of came into this thing where we're lacking the historical context on where this complete, validate, and run pattern came from. And I was just hoping to start and get some insight there.
I'm positive that I was the one behind the pattern, but I can't remember the exact history. So let me tell you what I remember. Beforehand, each and every single command was a single method, usually where we did everything. One big function where we put everything. It was super hard to test, and the majority of the tests were written such that you were initiating the test factories and then injecting those test factories. And back in the early days, the factory that was behind the kubectl was pretty big with lots of data in it. Throughout the couple year releases, we cut the factory to minimum, hopefully. And we figure that for ease of tests and for composability, we will go with a pattern where we will have a structure describing the command and methods, which will be describing the 3 steps, because we figure we've noticed from going from command to command that these were the 3 usual actions that people were doing, where first of all you would be filling in the creating clients, defaulting some values, do additional parsing of the commands, basically what is currently happening within the complete. Then there was usually the validation phase, and then eventually was the actual execution of a command. And to be able to focus your unit tests on particular functionality, whether validation is working properly, or whether your main execution code of the command, the ability to inject all the prerequisites and then just invoke run and check the output was the simplest possible way. Similarly, we come up with, because that was pretty much at the same time, it was, I think, over a period of 1 year or so, myself, David Eads, Juan Valeo, Sean, and Phil, we were involved in reshaping the majority of the kubectl. So I think that was what I remember about it. Can't remember whether that was written down somewhere. Maybe that was discussed several times. I would probably have to go through the old agenda. Maybe there are discussions where we were covering these topics and where we come up with the current flow, since that's basically the simplest that we could come up with. Is there, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's good to have some context. We figured it was around testing improvements and dependency injection and all that. So this really spun out of this page you have open here. Basically, so I'm doing a complete on this command, and we had a discussion that said, we should move this to the validate section. And then the issue I have trying to standardize all this is, so basically saying we should validate inside of validate, which makes sense. But if you scroll down a little bit more to the next couple lines, you see this, basically I'm checking if there's an index out of bound. No, go back up, sorry. Like 88. And so it's either, right, so if we don't do a check to see if there's any args there, that's gonna panic. And maybe this is like a bad one case example, but I feel like this is gonna come up more, where either way, like if we move this into validate, then it's still doing some like completion to set up the command. So I feel like there's still something missing there.
So if you recall the discussion that we had some time ago and there was a PR, I'm not sure if that emerged some time ago, but still currently the structures that we have and the code that is behind every command is tightly coupled with Cobra library, because we usually map 1-to-1 and then additionally do that. If we go, and probably that's one of the reasons, because if you look at the code, you're literally injecting arguments from a command maybe that's the missing bit that we have. Most probably complete should be split into two elements, where one is responsible for filling in the structure components from flags, and only then the complete, validate, run flow would make sense. Because currently we are very tightly coupled to Cobra command. And back at the time, it did make sense. It's not that I'm envisioning that we will be changing from Cobra to something else, but the path of going one step forward and preparing ourselves as if we would be changing Cobra is probably that missing step. Because yeah, and I'm pretty sure that even after we do that, there will be some edge cases like the one that you're pointing out, where there will be a gray line between one and the other, and we will always have those discussions whether this should happen here or there. I wouldn't worry about that one. It will be always case by case, but definitely we would like to have a shot at the full split. If I remember correctly, the kubectl wait command is after that split, and what it does the initial step where we are translating flags to options from args, and only then we do just run, because there are no particular. But the flags to options is actually translating actual flags into specific wait options. And there is a separate wait flag structure. So if you, as a user of wait command, and wait command, for example, is being used in delete, if you check delete, the wait logic is taken from this wait command. So if you're a user and if you want to expose wait flags, you'll have to wire your wait flags. If you want to just use the functionality, you don't care about the flags, you can just fill in the wait options that you care about and run it. So either you can reuse your command in both ways, as an extension or improvement to your command, even up to the flags, or if you don't care about the flags, you just take the functionality. So I'm guessing that will be the missing bit in your example. So the wait command, and then if you have a look at the delete command, the wait options are part of the delete, because if I remember correctly, as part of the functionality there is that you can wait for the deletion to complete before proceeding, or you don't have to wait, but that depends on the flag being passed.
Okay, that's helpful. Brian, did you have anything to add?
No, I think, I mean, to me, I think it and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I think about it is that all the public methods exposed by the commands should not take a parameter of type Cobra command. So like the fact that it's Cobra command should be internal to the command. And so like complete, validate, and run should all operate on things like the wait options or other options that are kind of neutral, that don't specify that it's Cobra.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then
that's the ideal final goal, which probably will take some time to go to, but yeah.
And then I think the only other thing we were talking about was kind of like, I mean, there's certainly in some commands, I know none of this is, nobody's saying everything's perfect, but you know, like we have some validation in the complete methods, and then sometimes validations in the validation method. Usually it's in validation, but I think the role and the purpose of complete, in my mind, it's just to like fill in defaults, create things that it's more of like a convenience, so you don't have to repeat initialization and defaults everywhere. Is that correct?
The defaults are usually done through the new whatever options there is. Most frequently because we then wire the structural elements into flags, so that when you do, I don't know, kubectl describe help, you see the defaults wired to the flags. Probably with the wait example, which is the end goal, the ultimate end goal, you'll have a new wait flags, which will make sure the defaults are in, and then the two options method that is responsible for translating whatever user specified and the defaults into the actual wait options. And then when wait options will eventually complete, we'll know what to do with the rest of it. But yeah, it's pretty close to what you said, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that helps a little bit. I think I still don't have a clear view of, like in my mind, you know, validate and run make perfect sense. Complete, I'm trying to understand when I would want to use complete for something, or when I would want to, yeah.
Two quick notes. One is I think Cobra offers its own notion of validate. I forget what the command is. It's like check or something. So that's an alternative. The validate isn't run at the right time or something like that. And Cobra supports like the sort of like sticky validate, so it will run on subcommands. The other note is that Cobra offers Cobra, when you test Cobra, you can override like standard in and standard out, and these sort of things on the Cobra command itself. And not having Cobra in the actual implementation in the libraries makes total sense. What I don't think we have necessarily a clear idea on is, should we be plumbing standard in and standard out down there, right? You could imagine that you have some library, for instance, that emits some message as part of what it's doing, and then now you want to run a test, and you want to capture the output of that command, right? Like you may want to then pass in a bytes buffer or something as standard in or standard out or standard error, these sorts of things. So I think that's just one, like, I totally agree on not passing in Cobra. I'm not sure if we should pass in certain things like the output streams.
And that's a good point. I think there's probably some of the more complicated commands that are relying on the things that Cobra provides that maybe would be more involved as far as extracting out Cobra.
Should we go on to apply?
Yeah, I know that Antoine wants to cover this topic, and probably the construction of the commands is something that we will continue on discussing further as we go, and that's probably deserves another look at it, and figuring out where we want to go with this in the long term, because yeah, it's definitely worthy of more discussions. Antoine, let's get to your topic then.
Hello, hi. Okay, so yeah, I'm trying to sound happy. So we have this issue where kubectl apply server side doesn't work with --force, and so we could fix it. It's very easy. the question is, do we actually want people to do that? Because it sounds crazy to API machinery people to delete resource to recreate them, and because it's very disruptive to delete the resource and recreate it. And I think Daniel has made a good point somewhere in there at the bottom. Force is dangerous. What should we do? And I've been talking to Martin too, who was trying to create something that is related to that. Martin, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so this was around lifecycle directives. I don't know if that's necessarily, or it's probably possible that it's not appropriate for kube control, but it could be useful in lifecycle directives, where it's more of a declarative use case where there might be, the thought is around things like resources might have immutable fields, but if you want to apply this in a CI/CD system or something, you might want to delete and then recreate them. What we're looking at is having directives, so we only do it if the user actually says, I want to do this for this particular resource.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Yeah, so the question is, do we actually like this feature of like forcing? Do we want to encourage people to use it? Do we want to support it? Do we have a guideline against it? What do we want to do with that?
I'm guessing that the current reason that we have the force is probably it did make sense in the past when we were doing the client side apply.
You said it made sense or it didn't?
It made sense in the past.
Yeah.
But with the server side apply, it's slightly different.
Yeah.
I kind of understand the original author expectation, but then at the same time, the server side apply is slightly different than the old apply.
I mean, I can see why, if we have client-side apply first, why it would make sense to say, okay, if we can server-side apply, then we're going to delete and recreate for the same reasons, right? What applies to client-side in this case also applies to server-side, I think. So, but the question is, the problem I think we have is that if we start propagating this command, this flag, the -- force flag to everything, then we're kind of encouraging people to use this feature. And I think what we're trying to say is that, at least from the API machinery, it makes little sense to have this feature. I mean, I can see why it makes sense, but should we have that in a CI/CD pipeline? Like, should you have -- force enabled by default on your CI/CD pipeline? I'm pretty sure that the answer should be no, because it's too dangerous. Then when are people supposed to use that? If they want to actually create, delete and recreate, then they can do it manually.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, if you're trying to apply a breaking change and in his example from the original description, it's just that he's introducing a breaking change.
Yes.
The probably with the server, maybe we can start with a simple warning that the force does not work with server side apply. With the server side apply, we can't break the backwards compatibility for sure, but the server side apply, I think it's still beta, which means we can probably change the force behavior on this one and say that this doesn't work with server side. If you want to do a forceful, you should be falling back to manual delete and then apply.
Yeah, that seems like an option. So you're suggesting that if someone is trying to do kubectl apply -- server side -- parse, we should fail right away. Well, so definitely we shouldn't have this error that we can see in the bug, but we should see directly fail with an error saying just delete and recreate the resource manually.
Yeah, probably just fail at the validation stage. That, or we can just put a big warning that force does not work with the server side. If you want to delete and recreate, you should do it manually with a server side apply. I'm perfectly fine with this approach.
Okay, so you seem to agree that -- I guess my question is, would we implement -- parse again today?
Probably I would not. I would need to find, and I'm going to do it right after this call, figure out when and how it was added back then. But a lot of changes landed in the old days for numerous different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, I understand that. Thank you, Maciej. That's super useful.
Sure.
I have an example that I could add. I maintain a CI/CD tool, and one case that I had to use in the past, the force option within that tool was that there was a bug on PDB that never allowed it to be mutated at all. So we had a special case for that resource where we turned on force, just to add context to another case where somebody might have used it. But of course, like we could have changed our automation to do a delete and a create more manually in that case as well.
I'm not saying that there are no cases for the usage, because just the fact that this bug exists is a clear signal that it happened in the past and it was added. But since there is a viable alternative where you manually invoke delete and then apply, it's perfectly fine to have a reasonable approach with this one. And promoting good approach with the server-side apply is a good starting place, I guess.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, I think we're 1 minute after top of the hour. Thank you very much all for stand-ups. I noticed that Chris wrote that there's nothing more that he can add other than whatever he wrote already in the doc. So I'm not gonna hold you more than this. Thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks. Stay safe and have a good one. Thank you all. Bye.